What's the first thing you think of when you think of the Batman Arkham franchise? Is it the story mode? Is it the combat, the stealth? It could be various things, right? The map. There's a lot of things it could be. However, what I would consider to be the backbone of this entire franchise would be the boss fights. Because without the boss fights, there isn't really much to go with. If these games literally just consisted of you taking on little thug NPC characters the whole time, then it wouldn't be as challenging or as fun. So today, I wanted to go through what was the best boss fight in each Batman Arkham game. Now, before we get into this, I want you guys to go down to the comments right now and guess what you think the best boss fight from each game is going to be. And without wasting too much of your time, we're going to get right into this list. For something to be considered a boss fight, I do believe it does have to fit into some sort of specific criteria. What is a boss fight exactly? Well, I'm going to set the standard right now as a boss fight is something that is meant to be more challenging than a standard thug. If you can't just beat them with super simple maneuvers, and if they have some sort of health bar, if there's more difficult challenges, and they do more complex things than regular thugs do in these games, then it's going to count as a boss fight. Now, for Batman Arkham Asylum, this is a bit tricky because most of the boss fights are mostly just Titans. There's not really much else to it, but the Titan boss fights they're fine, but they're not great by any means. So I had to do some actual thinking on this one. And I was kind of stuck between the Killer Croc section and the Scarecrow sections, because those two are like the most interesting sections of the entire game. Now, you could argue that those two sections are not considered boss battles. However, I would disagree in the sense of it's not a typical boss fight with a health bar that you have to defeat. However, it is something that does consist of more complex challenges than something like a regular Titan fight even. Like a regular Titan fight is the same thing over and over again. Even the Bane boss fight is very, very similar. Joker boss fight is terrible. So you're kind of stuck with either the Killer Croc or the Scarecrow type. Now this type of boss is a lot more stealth based. You don't actually touch them in any sort of capacity physically. The Scarecrow one obviously being a lot more psychological, and the Killer Croc one's meant to be more like ominous and creepy. You have to be very quiet. You can't move at a certain speed, otherwise he can just grab you and pull you underneath the water. So it's between those two for me personally. And in my opinion, I'm actually going to go with the Scarecrow sections. First of all, because there is 3 of them, and the 3 is obviously going to be better than the 1. But I also just kind of like the whole idea of the psychological battle a bit more, almost like a whole hallucination into a different world, and you can't get spotted, otherwise you're dead. I just like the actual aspect of the Scarecrow sections a lot more, and there is actual fights in the 3rd one, so it kind of just takes the icing on the cake for me. I'd understand if someone didn't consider the Scarecrow sections or the Killer Croc sections an actual boss fight, but for me personally, I'm going to go with the Scarecrow section as the best boss in Batman Arkham Asylum. Moving on to Batman Arkham City, this one is not really as much of a debate. I think everybody knows at this point the best boss fight in Batman Arkham City is Deadshot. I'm kidding. Please do not pull up the pitchforks. It was just a joke. Relax. The Deadshot boss fight is absolutely terrible. No, the best boss fight in the Batman Arkham franchise, the Batman Arkham franchise and Batman Arkham City is the Mr. Freeze boss battle. Because this boss battle is a stealth one, so it's different than a typical boss fight like I had mentioned in Batman Arkham Asylum, but it's also different in the sense that you can't use the same move more than once. Usually in a boss battle, in order to defeat an enemy, you generally have to do the same thing over and over again, but maybe with slight variations in the course of said battle. However, in this case, you have to use different methods each and every time. And if you play it on the hard difficulty, you need 8 different ways to take down Mr. Freeze. Now, I know technically you can use the same move more than once if you know how to manipulate with those ice sculptures of Nora. I never really figured that out. I don't really care to figure it out because then it would just make it too easy. And in the New Game Plus, you need 9 different methods to take down Mr. Freeze. And some of them are very, very simple. But once you get to the 5th or 6th one, and you start to run out of ways, it can be extremely tricky to remember. And you can't use your detective mode too much because I believe that Mr. Freeze can disable it or make it like a jammer type of detective mode. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he can actually disable your detective mode if it's used too much. In this boss battle, I don't think there's really a lot else you could say. This is just the best boss battle in the Batman Arkham franchise due to the actual difficulty of it. Batman Arkham Origins, this is the game that literally defined its entire, sales pitch. based around the 8 assassins, right? That was kind of the whole idea of this game, was the 8 boss battles. And a lot of them were kind of mid, some of them weren't great, but the best one of those 8, and it's going to be the top 3 in the franchise for me personally, is actually going to be the Deadshot one. This time I'm being serious, Deadshot actually gets his glory. This was the best boss battle, for me at least, in Batman Arkham Origins. Now, you could say that you're sensing a bit of a theme, right? That maybe I'm the type of player that doesn't necessarily enjoy a typical boss battle. And while that's not necessarily true, I also do enjoy a boss battle that kind of requires some sort of tactical thinking, as opposed to just beating an enemy down. Now, you could argue that you do have to beat an enemy down, right? You still have to beat up Deadshot. This boss battle is tricky for a multitude of different reasons, right? This is kind of similar to, like, the Batman Arkham City Catwoman Two-Face boss battle, if you guys remember that. It's kind of similar to that, except in this one, you can't silent take down Deadshot because he's kind of, like, armored. So you actually have to do a beatdown on him, while there's constant other armored thugs. And if you... or not armored thugs, I guess you could just say armed thugs. And you can take those guys out, but then even more will respawn, so it doesn't really matter if you take those guys out or not. And then you have to continuously beat down Deadshot whilst there are armed thugs trying to kill you at the same time. And Deadshot's shots are so deadly, I believe you can only take about 2 or 3 of them before you die. And on top of that, towards the end of the boss battle, you actually have to make sure that he doesn't see you as he has a hostage. And if he manages to see you, he will kill this hostage. So there's a multitude of different layers to this, right? And it's not like you can just spam smoke pellets, right? You only get one. The disruptor is very inconsistent in this game. The gadgets in Batman Arkham Origins are extremely limited. So this one for me was just the most difficult, but it was also the most fun because it requires some actual tactical thinking. Makes you actually have to think like the Bat, as opposed to doing other ones. But I will give an honorable mention to the TN1 Bane section, because that one was creepy. I remember playing that one as a kid. It was friggin' scary, and it was terrifying that you'd have to hide an event and have Bane be able to reach it and grab you and throw you up against the wall. That one's an honorable mention. That one's my personal favorite just to play, just because of the nostalgia it gives me. But in terms of the best gameplay, it has to go to Deadshot. Batman Arkham Knight is a bit of a tough pick, though, because of the fact that Batman Arkham Knight's boss fight, despite it having such good combat and stealth sections, the actual boss fights in this game were actually just awful, right? There was not very many boss fights in this game that I could look at and say, you know, I actually kind of enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. There's probably only one that I can think of off the top of my head, and even if I look it up, I guarantee you, if you look at the list of boss fights, there's just not very many good ones. Too many of them include the Batmobile, which a lot of people didn't necessarily like. I know that some people might go for, like, the Riddler boss fight, because that one was okay. It wasn't the worst thing ever. But there is just not very many good boss fights in Batman Arkham Knight, because this game was not boss fight focused. This one was more Batmobile focused, as well as, like, you know, combat and stealth focused. It wasn't necessarily story driven or good with the boss fights. But if I had to pick a boss fight, I would actually give it to the Arkham Knight Jason Todd one towards the end of the game, when Jason Todd reveals himself and you have to do that boss fight. That one's actually pretty decent in my opinion, and it's actually not too bad. I know it's another stealth one, but guys, you have to understand, Batman Arkham Knight does not have really any good hand-to-hand combat bosses that I'm like, yeah, that was really a lot of fun. I would enjoy doing that again. Batman Arkham Knight doesn't have that. But the Jason Todd section was actually relatively decent, because if you even go near him in the slightest and he sees you, he's going to one-shot you and you're dead. As well as he brings in thugs that, you know, you can't use a detective vision on. You can't use certain gadgets because of the fact that Jason Todd is in the room, as well as the sentry guns that, you know, do like the circles, and if they see you, they're going to shoot you. There's basically a lot of different enemy types throughout the course of this boss battle that make it extremely difficult to even get close to him. And you have to beat him multiple times in order to actually end the actual boss battle overall. Even though you don't actually really beat him up or anything, being able to just sneak up underneath him to get him is extremely difficult at times, and can be very, very mentally straining and tiring, because once he kills you a few times, it starts to become extremely frustrating. But this boss battle, in my opinion, presents a very good challenge, and it's something that was actually the only decent boss battle in Batman Arkham Knight, in my opinion. Last but not least, for Batman Arkham Shadow. This one was a little bit tricky for me because I was originally going to go with that Bolton boss fight. I'm forgetting the guy's first name off the top of my head. That Tiger Guard of some sort, where you basically have to 1v1 him as your alter ego, the Irving fella, if you guys remember that. And you have to 1v1 this massive giant, essentially, and it's not an easy fight at all. I remember dying multiple times while playing it, but then the more I thought about it, I remember that there's one that almost slipped between the cracks, and that was that Shadow Batman boss fight. This one was actually extremely difficult, and I did die multiple times having to try to beat this one as well, because of the fact that this big creepy guy, right? It's under the influence of Scarecrow. At the time, Dr. Crane. This is like before he became Scarecrow. And you essentially have to take on this big creepy guy who will rip the bat symbol out of his chest and throw it at you, as well as you have to avoid this goo that's sitting on the ground at the same time, while trying to use a batarang to throw it at the bat symbol from this big creepy creature. It's very, very creepy. It's very, very effective. But this is also a really good boss. This was extremely difficult. Adding difficult layers as the boss battle goes on. This one kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Solomon Grundy one from Batman Arkham City. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Poison Ivy from Batman Arkham Asylum. Just like little things with that, but with a really eerie and creepy setting. And usually I'm not a fan of stuff that's like scary or horror-esque. And even though this isn't a horror thing, it does look very creepy. But I actually really, really enjoyed it in this case because it's not some simple hand-to-hand combat thing. No, this is also about Batman having to solve and deal with his biggest fear, which I believe in this boss battle was him demonstrating that he doesn't need to kill people to stop the criminals. That's what it seems like. That's what I got from it, at least. But having to deal with multiple different things at the same time and making it slightly more difficult as it goes on, like adding in flying bats that come at you while this black goo is coming at you on the ground, while he's throwing the bat symbol at you. It's all very orchestrated, and it's all very difficult, and it's all very tedious and annoying, but at the same time, you feel so accomplished when you beat it. Because this game didn't really have a lot of boss fights, but in my opinion, this one is the best one in the game. And guys, this is the best boss battle in each Batman Arkham game. Let me know what you guys thought of this down in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What was your favorite boss battle? And in a future video, we're going to be going over the worst boss battles in the Batman Arkham franchise. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you've made it to this point of the video, then I'm going to also announce in about 2.5, 3 weeks-ish, we have that live stream where I'm playing all 4 Batman Arkham games in one day. So, if you guys are interested in seeing that, make sure you guys subscribe. Thank you guys so much for everything. You guys really do show me massive amounts of support in these videos, and I continue to make them out of pure enjoyment and because you guys love seeing them. So let me know what you guys want to see next down in the comments below. I do have a video coming out on Gotham Knights actually relatively soon because I'm finally getting around to playing that game. So thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Peace!